Let's talk about prayer. We've been bringing back past episodes from the Speak Lord podcast, and this week I have two of them for you, both focusing on prayer. It's an incredible thing, but it's also a very familiar word. In fact, it's a familiar activity. Maybe you do it multiple times a day, and maybe you do it without giving it much thought. What a privilege prayer is. We're going to begin with Speak Lord for Kids, episode 92, and Rue takes us to the story of Jonah and shares an awesome perspective on prayer. This one is a rebuke to Christians. We don't always pray in difficult times quite like we think we would when we're at the peaceful Bible study thinking about prayer. When we are running from God, we don't really want to talk to Him. Rue says the greatest stuff in these episodes. And one of the lines that just makes me smile, she says, "One nice part about the story is that they didn't want to throw him overboard." Not only is she incredibly cute, she has a powerful message about prayer. She says it so well. And here's that episode.
Speak Lord for Kids. Jonah chapter 1, verses 10 through 14. Jonah told the men that he was running away from God. The men became very afraid when they learned this. They asked Jonah, "What terrible thing did you do against your God?" The wind and waves, the sea were becoming stronger and stronger. So the man said to Jonah, "What should we do to save ourselves? What should we do to you to make the sea calm?" Jonah said, "I know, I did wrong. That is why the storm came on the sea. So throw me into the sea, and the sea will become calm." Instead, the man tried to row the ship back to shore, but they couldn't do it. The wind and the waves in the sea were too strong, and they became stronger and stronger. So the man cried to the Lord, "Lord, please don't say we are guilty of killing an innocent man. Please don't make us die for killing him. We know you are the Lord, and you will do whatever you want." When the men asked Jonah what they should do, why didn't Jonah just say they should pray? That's what they told him to do, pray to your God that he might save us. But for some reason, Jonah doesn't pray. Maybe he didn't feel like talking to God since he was running away from him. But I think he should have prayed before telling them to throw him in the water. I wonder if being thrown in the water was just God's idea or Jonah's idea. But one part of this story is kind of nice, is that those people didn't want to throw Jonah over. They tried really hard to row to shore without throwing him overboard. But they couldn't. And then you know what they do? They prayed. Jonah didn't pray, but the people who didn't know God did pray. And they asked that they won't be guilty of killing Jonah. Then they said in verse 14, "We know you are the Lord, and you will do whatever you want." Jonah knew that he was the Lord, and that he will do whatever he wants, but he still tried to run away from him. If God will do whatever he wants, then it doesn't do much good to try to run from him. The men on the boat with Jonah did the right things. They prayed. So even if you're running from God, don't forget to pray. Speak Lord is a resource of the Palmer Seventh-day Adventist Church. Find us online at...
A second message about prayer comes in an episode called Try Asking God. And I love the textual insight in this one about God appearing in Gibeon. You'll hear all about it in the message. But what it tells us is that God meets us in the worst of places, in the place of our failure and our sin. He doesn't look for us to be in a more respectable condition. He just wants us to talk to Him right where we are, in all places, not just the good places. In the storm, just like Jonah was, in a boat, in the belly of a well, or at the very place of our sin. Here's our second episode about prayer. You're listening to Speak, Lord, and I'm Ryan Rogers. I do this podcast because I love to hear God speak through the words of the Bible, and I want to share that with you. If you could ask for anything and get it, what would you ask for? That's a big question, but it's not entirely hypothetical. God tells us to ask of Him. He says, ask, and it will be given to you. Do you need something? Have you tried asking God for it? How do you feel about asking God for things? Do you feel greedy? Like there's a limit to how much God is willing to give, and you need to be careful about which things you actually ask Him for? Do you feel that way? Or maybe you question if it really works. Does it really do anything? I don't understand all this, but I believe that the things I need most are the things that only God can give. And I believe that He wants us to ask for them. So I'm encouraging us to ask of God. There's this story of King Solomon asking for wisdom. It's found in 1 Kings chapter 3. And I remember talking about this story recently. I might have even done a Speak Lord episode on it, but I read it recently and it spoke to me again. So I'm going to share about it again. At the time that Solomon asked God for wisdom, he was set up pretty well. Chapter 2 says that his throne was established before the Lord forever. And the final words of the chapter say, so the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. Then chapter 3 begins by telling of Solomon's marriage to Pharaoh's daughter as an alliance. So politically, Solomon was set up really well. And he was also strong in his connection with God. Verse 3 says, Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and made offerings at the high places. So this is the one problem. Solomon made offerings at the high places. But then notice what God does. This is verse 4 and 5. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, ask what I shall give you. God appears to Solomon with this great invitation for Solomon to ask of him. Did you notice that he appeared to him at Gibeon, the great high place? This was the one thing not good about Solomon's connection with God, and that's where God shows up. God could have abandoned him to this sinful practice. Instead, that's right where he went. God is so cool. He goes to Solomon's worst place and invites Solomon to ask of him. And this should give us so much hope. If we ever question God's desire to give good things to us, remember that He showed up at the high place. So if you're in a place that's not really that good spiritually, you might ask God for things, but you're disconnected and you're not very proud of where God would find you. Remember that God showed up at the high place. And no matter where you are right now, His invitation comes to you. Ask of me. So Solomon asked, and he asked for wisdom. He said, give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this, your great people? And God was a huge fan of that request. We read that it pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked for this. And God said to him, because you have asked for this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before, and none like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked for, both riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare with you all your days. God wants us to ask of Him. Specifically, He promises in the book of James that if anyone lacks wisdom and he asks God for it, that he will get it. But He also wants us to ask for our other needs. What do you need? Do you need courage or peace or purity. Maybe you could begin by spending some time in prayer, asking God to align your heart with His so that your request would be one that pleases Him. And then when you think you know what you need, what God could give you, ask Him and trust that God is able to give and that He actually wants to. What will you ask of God? How is God speaking to you? Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. You can find more of Speak, Lord by searching for Palmer SDA Church wherever you get podcasts and at PastorRyanRogers.com.